Alright class, this is Chapter 16, International Dimensions of Human Resource Management. Obviously this chapter is important because the world economy has become so global and so interlinked across the globe. So there's a lot we can learn from this chapter. Probably some of you will end up working in other countries, being expatriates, or at least working for multinational organizations. So let's see what we can learn from each other, from Cassio, and I found a few points that I wanted to emphasize about this topic as well. One thing I do want to emphasize is that it's kind of amazing how high a failure rate expatriate assignments have. So both getting the work done over there successfully, high failure rate on that once you send one of the managers overseas, and then also high failure rate on keeping the expatriate when you bring them home. So we'll talk about a couple items related to that. It's kind of reminds me of when we talk about mergers. When two organizations merge, it is extremely difficult to pull off a successful merger. They have a high failure rate, and this seems to be similar with expatriate assignments. So we certainly want to learn everything we can about this, particularly if you're going to become an expatriate or you're in an organization that's going to expand overseas or send someone overseas. This would be something good to spend quite a bit of time on up front, investigating best practices in the research, because organizations aren't using the best practices, and it is resulting in outcomes like ineffective expatriate assignments and high turnover rate after bringing the expatriates home, after they've collected all that knowledge about how to do business overseas, knowledge that we say is very important for high performers and high potential, yet we oftentimes lose that hard-won knowledge the expatriate gained once they come back, get dissatisfied with their situation in the home organization, and leave to go work for a competitor. So this is, as I said, an area where it's important to identify and implement best practices. One subtopic related to expatriates is international compensation seems to be very complicated. So figuring out how much to pay an expatriate who's working in another country, it is tricky. And so we don't need to belabor that. Most managers that take this class are not going to be figuring out how much somebody should earn in another organization, but just think it would be helpful to know that this is a complex area, this international compensation, but there are consultants who can help with that, and there is also software that can help with that. So you might investigate both. Certainly you want to do your homework and find out the consultants who have a good track record and good customer satisfaction and truly do know what they're talking about, and do the homework on software as well for international compensation. I suspect that like with a lot of things, consultants, even within this subset of international compensation, that's a pretty broad area. So I bet that there are experts on international compensation for Asia, or maybe even subsets of Asia, that might not be the best or most knowledgeable about, for instance, international compensation in Africa or Europe. So certainly some of what they've learned would be transferable, but again, I think it'd be pretty cautious about who you would hire to help decide what an expatriate would earn during this overseas assignment. But it is an important topic, because you certainly don't want that expatriate that's undergoing this kind of rigorous and stressful assignment to another country and dealing with adjusting to this overseas environment, worried about their pay. But at the same time, you don't want to overpay that individual. All right, shift gears a bit. Wanted to point out that in working with global partners, there are many opportunities for misunderstandings. So, in other words, if you're an expatriate or your organization is expanding overseas, you'll be working with people in that other country, these global partners. And there's a lot of opportunities for misunderstandings. And each party, you and the global partner, may be projecting your hopes on the other party, hopes not grounded in reality, right? So have you ever experienced that in life where you hope for something, so you kind of tune out cues that you're picking up on because you really want this one particular outcome, so you're projecting what you want and not paying attention to the signs or cues that you're getting that are saying that you might get something different. So hoping for what you want. And this happens on both sides, so we have to be kind of careful to really set aside some of these hopes or outcomes that we're hoping for and looking at the facts, what's happening on this international assignment. So this, I think I need to be a little bit clearer here, and I'll give you an example. One study that I read, I'll quote, and this will make more sense about what I was just saying about the each party may be projecting their hopes on the other party, hopes not grounded in reality. So this study said that appearances can be deceiving, especially in developing countries. Some people who deport themselves like successful business people are more about style over substance. Pay more attention to what people do than what they show. So this study was focused on Vietnam in particular. A lot of organizations are expanding to Vietnam because there's a fairly educated workforce there and low wage rates. And this is a pretty good country to use as a case study. And they found that there are people that have nice cars, dress in nice business clothes, have good technology, the laptops and whatever else, high-tech things, and talk a good game about business and want to position themselves as either a manager in your expanding operation overseas or to help you as a consultant. But apparently a lot of these people, sometimes they don't have a whole lot to deliver in terms of knowledge, abilities, or work ethic. So sometimes in other countries the perception is if I can make a living, I can dress nice, have a nice car, that's good enough. So sometimes style prevails over substance, and individuals are able to get away with that for quite some time. So you really need to dig deeper. What do people know if they're going to be a global partner? Evaluate these people carefully. What do they really know? What's their track record? What's their experience? And don't get misled. So along those lines, to avoid some of those pitfalls, it can be helpful to find a trustworthy cultural interpreter who can explain the reality. So what I'm referring to here is a cultural interpreter. That could be somebody from that other country who spent a lot of time in your country, who can help you translate what's really going on, help you figure out the cultural norms, how business is done in this country. Or it could be somebody from your country, your home country, that's been in that country a long time. Again, got to check these people out carefully. I just think really there's a lot of people that want to get their hands in your wallet, and you have to be careful about who you're hiring and who you're trusting. But I think these cultural interpreters that kind of understand a bit about your culture and a lot about the culture you're trying to expand into can be invaluable in avoiding some of the pitfalls. They can help you not have to learn everything the hard way. If you employ expatriates in your organization, you will need to update your organization and your knowledge on a number of topics. So I won't belabor all these topics because, again, you may not be in a position to need knowledge on all these topics, but just wanted to make you aware that there's quite a bit to sending an expatriate to another country, and a lot of homework will be needed beforehand. So some of the topics you would need to look into: how do you identify and select global expatriate managers? How do you identify people who would be a good fit for that position, and what processes, what selection methods do you use to pick the people or person that you will send? How do you train and develop these expatriate managers? How do you compensate them? We've already talked about how complicated that can be. How do you repatriate them? In other words, how do you bring them home? You don't just buy them a plane ticket and bring them home. We'll talk about in a moment how difficult it seems to be for expatriates to readjust to the returning home. There's kind of a reverse culture shock in many instances. And then what works for expatriates in terms of performance appraisal? So there may have to be some adjustments made in terms of performance management. So quite a few things to think through before, during, and after an expatriate assignment. Because repatriation, or that adjustment once the expatriate assignment is done, I'd like to spend a bit of time on that, on repatriation. Seems to be a huge challenge. Organizations lose a lot of the people after they bring them home. They disturbingly high percentage of the time, the expatriate manager will leave the home organization after returning home. So organizations are still not doing enough to help expatriates readjust to the home country. That much is clear. They're not doing enough. If you want to retain an expatriate, you'd better do an all-out effort. So again, we need to look into best practices and follow up and implement those best practices, because we're swimming upstream, to use slang. We're really fighting against the odds here to have a successful repatriation. That's why I'm saying we need to do an all-out effort. It will be important to have a career development plan for expatriates that articulates how the international experience will be incorporated in their future career plans. So certainly before they go and then after they return. What did this expatriate assignment that I agreed to do that was stressful and challenging, how is that contributing to my career development? How does that fit into my career plans? What's next for me? Maintaining communication channels with expatriates is essential for repatriate assimilation and adjustment. So while these people are gone, maintaining regular channels of communication is essential. That will help reduce some of that reverse culture shock when they do return home, because things do change in the home organization while they're gone. And if we can minimize some of the confusion and surprise when they return back through these clear communication channels, we should. Some of the writers talk about connectivity mechanisms. Connectivity mechanisms is the term that helps keep the expatriates in touch and informed while they're on this assignment. So you could certainly look into that and maybe do a keyword search around that term, connectivity mechanisms, if indeed you are going to have an expatriate manager in your organization. And then one common problem is failure by the organization to utilize the expatriates' newly acquired international skills. So they've come home, they've done all this learning, they've got all this intellectual capital now on how to do business in other countries. How are we going to use that? So most people do want a skill that they've developed to be used. It'd be a little disappointing otherwise. And this is a pretty hard-won set of knowledge that these expatriates have gained. If they've managed to perform successfully on one of these overseas assignments, it's pretty easy to imagine that they would expect to see these skills utilized in some way. Maybe not immediately, but to at least not feel like all that knowledge and work that they did was lost or a waste. In other words, okay, that was fine, we opened the plan over there, but while I was gone, my peers were advancing in the organization. I was more or less forgotten, and all that knowledge I have doesn't seem to have a use back here in the home country. We don't want that perception. So a lot of things to think about, before expanding into another country, and not something to do lightly, certainly. So I think as MBA students, and hopefully from taking this course, you now have a lot better understanding of some of those challenges, and therefore you would be able to deal with those challenges of the international assignments, overseas assignments, repatriation, much more effectively than people who haven't had a preview about some of these issues.